My boss fired me for attendance issues after I worked 80-hour weeks to save his failing project, claiming I was unreliable while he secretly stole credit for every solution I created. Monday morning, I walked back into that same office with federal agents, a folder full of evidence, and the sweetest revenge imaginable. But how did a terminated employee bring down an entire corporate conspiracy in just one weekend? Victor Ashbourne slammed the termination letter down on his desk so hard that his pen holder rattled. The sound made my stomach drop like I was falling off a cliff. After working 80 hours every week for 3 months straight, this was the last thing I expected on a Friday afternoon. Attendance issues. I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never learned. Victor, there has to be some mistake. I've been here every single day trying to save the Montrose project. His smile looked like plastic, fake and cold. Company policy clearly states that employees must maintain punctuality standards. You've been consistently late to our morning strategy meetings. Heat rushed to my face because I was working until 3 in the morning fixing the system crashes, the ones that would have cost us millions of dollars if I hadn't caught them. Personal time management isn't the company's responsibility. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that costs more than my monthly rent. We pay you to be productive during business hours, not to create drama about overtime. My hands started shaking. The Montrose client project had consumed my entire life for months. Sandra, my wife, barely spoke to me anymore because I missed dinner every night. Ellie, my 7-year-old daughter, had stopped asking when Daddy would read her bedtime stories. All of that sacrifice, all of those sleepless nights, debugging code and rebuilding databases, and now Victor was calling it attendance problems. The system integration I completed last weekend saved the entire contract, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Without that work, Montrose would have canceled and sued us for breach of contract. Anyone could have done that work. Victor's tone suggested he was discussing the weather, not destroying my career. The company doesn't owe you special recognition for doing your basic job duties. The office around us buzzed with normal Friday afternoon energy. Coworkers typed at their computers, discussed weekend plans, laughed at jokes shared over coffee. None of them knew that my world was crashing down just 20 feet away from their desks. This is insane, I whispered, reading the termination letter again. Victor, you know what I've contributed to this company. You've seen the client feedback praising my work specifically. Client feedback doesn't override documented performance issues. He opened a thick folder filled with papers. These attendance records show a clear pattern of unreliability. My heart pounded as I recognized the meeting notices in his folder. Morning briefings scheduled at 8 o'clock, when I was supposed to be monitoring the overnight system tests. Strategy sessions planned during the exact hours when I was fixing critical bugs that Victor himself had assigned as urgent priorities. You scheduled those meetings when you knew I couldn't attend, I said, the truth hitting me like a punch to the gut. You deliberately created conflicts between the emergency work and these meetings. Meetings are mandatory regardless of other tasks. Victor's expression never changed, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. Your inability to balance responsibilities demonstrates poor time management skills. The folder contained dozens of these deliberately conflicted schedules. Meetings arranged during my testing periods, briefings planned while I was in client calls that Victor himself had arranged, strategy sessions scheduled during the maintenance windows that require my constant attention. James Fletcher from Human Resources is waiting outside, Victor continued, glancing toward the door. He'll escort you through the exit procedures and collect your security badge. James appeared in the doorway right on cue, his face wearing that practiced, neutral expression HR people perfect over years of delivering bad news. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Rachel Lawton from the accounting department. Her usually cheerful face looked pale and worried, her eyes darting between Victor and me like she was watching a car accident happen in slow motion. This is wrong, I said, standing up slowly. You know this is wrong, Victor. Business decisions are rarely personal, he replied, already turning his attention to his computer screen. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your home address. Rachel stepped closer to the doorway, her mouth moving slightly, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. Her eyes locked with mine for just a moment, and I saw something there that made my skin crawl. Fear, maybe, or guilt, like she knew something terrible that she couldn't share. The Montrose project launches Monday, I said. One last attempt to make Victor see reason. Who's going to handle the final integration testing? The backup systems need constant monitoring during the transition. The team will manage perfectly fine without you. Victor's fingers clicked across his keyboard, dismissing me without even looking up. Companies are resilient. Individual employees are replaceable. James cleared his throat politely, the signal that my time was up. Corporate security protocols didn't allow for extended goodbye scenes or emotional outbursts. Clean, quick, efficient removal of terminated employees. Walking toward the door felt like moving through thick mud. 3 months of my life, my marriage hanging by a thread, my relationship with Ellie damaged by countless missed bedtime stories and soccer games, all sacrificed to save a project that Victor was now claiming anyone could have completed. Rachel's eyes followed me as James guided me down the hallway toward the elevator. She looked like someone desperate to speak, but trapped behind invisible barriers. Her fingers clutched a manila folder against her chest, knuckles white with tension. The elevator doors closed between us, and I wondered what secrets Rachel Lawton knew that could change everything. Rachel's footsteps echoed through the empty parking garage as she hurried toward my car. James Fletcher had finished the security escort procedure 10 minutes ago, leaving me alone with my cardboard box of personal belongings and a head full of unanswered questions. "Wait," she called out, her voice bouncing off the concrete walls. "Please, I need to tell you something important." I turned around, surprised to see her clutching the same manila folder she'd held upstairs. Her usually perfect hair was messy, like she'd been running her hands through it, and her professional smile was nowhere to be found. "Rachel, you shouldn't be down here talking to me," I said, glancing around for security cameras. "Victor might see this as some kind of conspiracy. Victor is announcing the Montrose project as a complete success tomorrow morning," she blurted out, ignoring my warning. "Helena Thornridge from corporate headquarters is flying in specifically to congratulate him on the amazing turnaround." My blood turned to ice. That's impossible. The final integration testing isn't even finished yet. The system won't be fully stable until next week. They're using your code. Rachel opened the manila folder with trembling fingers. "The programming solution you submitted Sunday night through the emergency portal." Victor forwarded it to the entire development team Tuesday morning, claiming he'd worked all night to create it. The parking garage suddenly felt like it was spinning around me. Sunday night, I'd spent 14 straight hours writing the most complex integration code of my career, solving problems that had stumped our best programmers for weeks. The solution was elegant, innovative, and completely my own work. "Show me," I said, moving closer to look at the documents in her folder. Rachel spread out printed emails across the hood of my car. The timestamps told an incredible story. My original submission at 3:17 Sunday morning, sent directly to the emergency development queue with my employee ID and digital signature. Victor's forwarded version sent Tuesday at 9:30, with a message explaining how he'd pulled an all-nighter to solve the Montrose integration challenges. He changed the author information, I whispered, scanning through the technical documentation. "Look at this. Every comment in the code now shows his name instead of mine." The development team thought it was weird, Rachel said, her voice barely audible. "Tony from programming asked me privately why Victor suddenly became a coding genius overnight. Everyone knows Victor hasn't written actual code in 5 years." My hand shook as I held the evidence of Victor's theft. 3 months of 80-hour weeks, missed family dinners, sacrificed weekends, and sleepless nights had been rewritten as Victor's heroic effort to save the company. "There's more," Rachel continued, pulling out financial documents. "I've been tracking some strange accounting irregularities in the Montrose project budget. External consulting fees that don't match any invoices I've seen." The numbers on the spreadsheet made my stomach turn. Thousands of dollars billed to Montrose for specialized consulting services during the exact periods when I was doing all the technical work. Services that had never been purchased, consultants who had never been hired. "Victor's been billing the client for work that you did for free," Rachel explained. Overtime that the company never paid you. He's charging Montrose as expensive consulting fees. That's fraud, I said, the word feeling heavy and dangerous. He's stealing from the client and stealing credit for my work. Rachel nodded grimly. I started noticing the pattern 3 weeks ago when I was preparing the quarterly expense reports. The consulting charges always appeared right after you submitted major technical solutions. The evidence painted a clear picture of calculated deception. Victor hadn't just fired me to cover up his incompetence. He'd been systematically stealing my work, billing clients for services I provided, and building his reputation on my innovations. Why are you telling me this? I asked, studying Rachel's nervous expression. You could lose your job for sharing confidential financial information. Because it's wrong, she said simply. Victor destroyed Tom Peterson last year with the same attendance manipulation. And before that, he got rid of Jennifer Carrick by claiming she couldn't handle the workload. Now I know he was stealing their work too. The pieces of a larger conspiracy began forming in my mind. Victor hadn't just targeted me randomly. He had a system for identifying talented employees, overworking them on critical projects, stealing their contributions, and then eliminating them before they could expose his fraud. Helena Thornridge is coming to promote him, Rachel continued. If she believes Victor personally saved the Montrose project, he'll probably get the regional director position. That means control over 6 divisions and dozens of employees. We have to stop him, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. This evidence proves everything. Rachel's expression darkened. It's not that simple. Helena Thornridge isn't just some random corporate executive. I did some research after I heard about her visit. She pulled out her phone and showed me a professional website. Helena Thornridge, Regional Vice President of Operations, standing next to a man in a family photo that I recognized immediately. That's Richard Ashbourne, Rachel said quietly. Victor's older brother. Helena is Victor's sister-in-law. The corruption went deeper than I'd imagined. Victor wasn't just a manipulative manager stealing credit from his employees. He had family connections protecting him at the corporate level, enabling his fraud and ensuring that his victims would never find justice through normal channels. So corporate won't help us, I said, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. Worse than that, Rachel replied. If Helena believes we're attacking her family member, she might destroy both of our careers permanently. Standing in that parking garage, surrounded by evidence of fraud and facing a conspiracy that reached into corporate headquarters, I realized that traditional approaches wouldn't work. Victor had built his system carefully, protecting himself with family connections and documented lies that made his victims look unreliable. But he made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated how much evidence a careful programmer could gather when properly motivated. My laptop's screen glowed in the darkness of my apartment at 2 a.m. as I scrolled through line after line of stolen code. The wireless password for my neighbor's internet connection had been embarrassingly easy to guess, and now I sat surrounded by printed emails, financial records, and technical documentation that painted a picture of corruption far worse than I'd imagined. Victor's theft wasn't random or desperate. Every piece of evidence showed careful planning, systematic exploitation, and calculated destruction of innocent employees. The pattern stretched back 3 years, affecting at least 7 different programmers who had mysteriously left the company after completing major projects. Jennifer Carrick had designed the entire customer database system that still powered our biggest clients. Her termination letter cited communication problems and difficulty working with team members. 2 weeks later, Victor had presented her work to the board as his own innovative solution. Tom Peterson had created the security protocols that protected our financial data. His firing blamed personality conflicts and inability to meet deadlines. Victor had submitted Tom's security framework to industry conferences, winning awards and recognition that built his reputation as a cybersecurity expert. Each stolen project followed the same formula. Victor would assign impossible workloads to talented employees, deliberately schedule conflicting meetings during their most productive hours, then document their attendance problems while they struggled to meet unrealistic demands. The employees would work themselves to exhaustion trying to prove their worth, unknowingly creating valuable intellectual property that Victor would claim as his own. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rachel. "Can't sleep either? Found something you need to see." 20 minutes later, she knocked softly on my apartment door, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the same worried expression she'd had in the parking garage. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, like she'd been wrestling with difficult decisions all weekend. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, settling onto my couch and opening her laptop. "About Victor having a system for targeting employees." So I dug deeper into the financial records. Her screen displayed spreadsheets that made my blood run cold. The consulting fraud was bigger than we'd realized. Victor hadn't just been billing clients for work that employees did for free. He'd been creating fake consulting companies, complete with business licenses and tax identification numbers. "Ashbourne Technical Solutions," Rachel said, pointing to a column of payments. "Sound familiar?" Victor's been paying himself consulting fees through this shell company for 2 years. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent billing, all disguised as legitimate consulting expenses. Victor had essentially been double-dipping, collecting his regular salary while billing clients for additional services that he never provided. "Look at this timeline," Rachel continued, switching to another spreadsheet. "Every time someone got fired for attendance issues, consulting payments to Ashbourne Technical Solutions increased dramatically the following month." The evidence revealed Victor's complete business model. He would identify talented employees with specialized skills, overwork them until they created valuable solutions, steal their work and bill it as expensive consulting, then eliminate the employees before they could discover the fraud. "We have him," I said, studying the financial trail. "This is enough evidence to destroy his career and send him to prison." Rachel's expression remained troubled. "Maybe, but look at who approved all these consulting contracts." She clicked through approval signatures on dozens of fraudulent payments. Every single consulting agreement bore the electronic signature of Helena Thornridge, Regional Vice President of Operations. Victor's sister-in-law hadn't just been protecting him from corporate oversight. She'd been actively participating in his fraud. "Helena's been approving fake consulting payments for months," Rachel explained. "Either she's completely incompetent or she's Victor's partner in this scheme." The corruption reached higher than I'd feared. Victor and Helena had created a family business within Technova, using their positions to systematically rob the company and destroy innocent employees who threatened their operation. My phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Thompson." Victor's voice was different than I'd ever heard it, dangerous and threatening. "Stay away from company business that doesn't concern you anymore." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, putting the call on speaker so Rachel could hear. "My security system flagged unusual network access attempts from your area," Victor continued. "Terminated employees who attempt to access confidential company information face serious legal consequences." Rachel's eyes widened as she realized Victor somehow knew about our investigation. Her fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, checking her network activity logs. "The company firewall tracks all access attempts," she whispered, showing me her screen. "Victor gets alerts whenever someone tries to view restricted financial data. Think carefully about your next moves." Victor's voice carried a cold threat. "Corporate takes industrial espionage very seriously. Helena Thornridge personally reviews all security violations." The call ended, leaving Rachel and me staring at each other in the silence of my apartment. Victor knew we were gathering evidence, and worse, he had the power to frame our investigation as criminal activity. "He's going to claim we were stealing company secrets," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "Helena will back up whatever story he tells." But Victor had made a crucial mistake in his threatening phone call. He'd revealed that his security system tracked network access attempts, which meant there would be digital logs of every fraudulent consulting document he'd ever created. "He's watching us," I said, formulating a new plan. "But that means he's also watching himself." Rachel looked confused until I explained my reasoning. If Victor's security system logged our investigation attempts, it also logged every time he accessed files to create his fake consulting records, Every time he downloaded employee work to claim as his own, and every time he manipulated attendance records to justify terminations. We don't need to steal company information, I realized. We need to prove that Victor's been stealing it systematically for years. The evidence was hidden in plain sight, buried in the security logs that Victor himself monitored. All we needed was a way to access those logs legally, with proper authorization from someone Victor couldn't threaten or control. Someone like the Montrose client, who had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for consulting services they'd never actually received. John Montrose's corner office overlooked downtown Haven Ridge through floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's cars. The silver-haired executive studied my evidence folder with the focused intensity of someone who built a multi-million-dollar business by paying attention to details that others missed. "These consulting charges are interesting," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making important decisions. "My accounting department questioned several of these invoices, but your company assured us the services were essential." I sat across from his mahogany desk, my heart pounding as I watched Montrose examine the fraudulent billing records that Rachel and I had carefully organized. Getting this meeting had required calling in every professional favor I'd accumulated over 5 years of client relationships. "Mr. Montrose, I wrote every line of code that saved your project," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was risking. "Victor Ashbourne never provided any consulting services. He stole my work and charged you for it." Montrose's sharp blue eyes studied the technical documentation that proved my authorship of the programming solutions. The code comments, the innovative algorithms, the unique problem-solving approaches all bore my distinctive style that several clients had praised in previous projects. "This is quite an accusation," Montrose said carefully. "You're claiming that Technova deliberately defrauded my company while you were employed there?" "Victor's been running this scheme for years," I replied, opening my laptop to show him the financial patterns Rachel had discovered. "Shell companies, fake consulting agreements, stolen intellectual property. Your project wasn't the first, and it won't be the last unless someone stops him." Montrose leaned back in his leather chair, processing the implications of what I'd revealed. His company had paid Technova nearly $2 million for the system integration project, including substantial consulting fees that had supposedly covered specialized technical expertise. "Why come to me with this information?" he asked. "Why not report it to Technova's corporate headquarters?" "Because the regional vice president approving these fraudulent payments is Victor's sister-in-law," I explained, showing him Helena Thornridge's signature on dozens of fake consulting contracts. "The corruption goes all the way to the top." Montrose's expression hardened as he realized the scope of the conspiracy. His business success had been built on trust and ethical partnerships, and discovering that a vendor had systematically cheated him triggered the kind of anger that could destroy careers. "What do you want from me?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Demand an independent audit of all consulting charges," I said. "Your company has the legal right to verify that services were actually provided. When the investigation begins, the evidence will speak for itself." Montrose picked up his phone and pressed a button. "Ruth, get me David Kingsley from our legal department. Tell him it's urgent." While we waited for the lawyer to arrive, Montrose asked detailed technical questions about the programming solutions that had saved his project. His background in engineering helped him understand the complexity of what I'd accomplished and the impossibility of Victor having created such innovative code overnight. "This integration technique," Montrose said, pointing to a section of my documentation. "I've never seen anything like it. How long did it take you to develop this approach?" 6 weeks of testing different algorithms," I replied. "The breakthrough came during my 4th consecutive all-nighter, when I realized the database conflicts could be resolved through recursive validation loops." Montrose nodded appreciatively. "Victor Ashbourne couldn't explain the technical details when I asked him about it last week. He kept referring me to the development team for specifics." David Kingsley arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a briefcase and wearing the serious expression of someone who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Montrose quickly summarized the situation while Kingsley examined the evidence I provided. "These consulting agreements contain several irregularities," Kingsley observed after studying the contracts. The service descriptions are vague. There are no detailed deliverables, and the payment schedules don't match industry standards. Can we demand an audit? Montrose asked. Absolutely, Kingsley replied. Our contract with Technova includes specific language requiring verification of all consulting charges. We can invoke that clause immediately. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rachel. Victor called emergency meeting with Helena. They know something's happening. Mr. Montrose, I said, showing him Rachel's message. Victor's already trying to cover his tracks. If you're going to act, it needs to be today. Montrose and Kingsley exchanged meaningful glances. Both men had built their careers on making decisive moves when opportunities presented themselves, and they recognized that delays would give Victor time to destroy evidence and manipulate the situation. David, draft a formal audit demand, Montrose instructed. I want it delivered to Technova's headquarters this afternoon, with copies to their legal department and corporate compliance office. What about Victor's sister-in-law? I asked. Helena Thornridge will try to block any investigation that threatens her family. Kingsley smiled grimly. Corporate fraud investigations follow federal protocols that override internal company politics. Once we trigger an official audit, Helena Thornridge won't be able to interfere without risking criminal charges herself. As Kingsley began drafting legal documents on his laptop, Montrose turned his attention back to me. This is going to get complicated for you personally. Are you prepared for Victor to claim you're a disgruntled employee seeking revenge? I have documentation proving everything, I replied. Code authorship records, email timestamps, financial discrepancies. The evidence will speak louder than Victor's lies. Montrose nodded approvingly. Good, because when this audit begins, Victor Ashbourne is going to discover that stealing from Montrose Industries was the biggest mistake of his career. But as Kingsley printed the audit demand documents, my phone rang with another unknown number. This time, the voice on the other end wasn't Victor's. Mr. Thompson, Helena Thornridge's cold tone carried the authority of corporate power. I think we need to have a conversation. The real battle was about to begin. Helena Thornridge's voice dripped with false sweetness through my phone speaker as John Montrose and David Kingsley listened from across the conference room table. Her tone reminded me of a snake preparing to strike, all smooth politeness hiding deadly intentions underneath. Corporate has received some concerning reports about your conduct since termination, she continued, each word carefully chosen to sound official and threatening. Accessing confidential company information without authorization carries serious legal penalties. Montrose gestured for me to put the call on speaker, his business instincts recognizing an opportunity to gather intelligence from our opponents. Kingsley pulled out a digital recorder, understanding that Helena's own words might provide crucial evidence. I haven't accessed any confidential information, I replied calmly, watching Kingsley nod approvingly at my careful response. Everything I've reviewed was provided to me by current employees who were concerned about financial irregularities. Helena's laugh sounded like breaking glass. Rachel Lawton has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of her unauthorized disclosure of proprietary financial data. She won't be able to help you with whatever scheme you're planning. My stomach dropped. Rachel had risked everything to expose Victor's fraud, and now she was paying the price for her courage. Helena and Victor were systematically eliminating anyone who threatened their operation, using corporate policies as weapons against honest employees. What do you want from me? I asked, though I suspected Helena's call had a specific purpose beyond intimidation. A meeting, she said smoothly. Today at 4 o'clock, Technova headquarters. Come alone, and we can discuss a mutually beneficial resolution to this unfortunate misunderstanding. Kingsley scribbled a note and slid it across the table. They're panicking. Don't go alone. I'll need to bring my legal representative, I said, following Kingsley's advice. That won't be necessary, Helena replied quickly. This is simply an informal conversation between professionals. No lawyers, no recordes, no complications. Montrose shook his head firmly, recognizing Helena's tactics from years of business negotiations. Powerful people who demanded private meetings without legal representation usually planned to make threats they couldn't afford to have documented. Corporate policy requires legal representation for all meetings involving terminated employees, I lied smoothly, hoping Helena wouldn't call my bluff. I'm sure you understand the importance of following proper procedures. Silence stretched across the phone connection as Helena realized her intimidation strategy wasn't working. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its fake politeness and revealed the cold calculation underneath. Mr. Thompson, I hope you understand the serious consequences of making false accusations against valued employees. Corporate takes defamation very seriously, especially when it involves fabricated evidence and conspiracy theories. Kingsley smiled grimly as he listened to Helena's poorly disguised threats. Her words revealed more about Technova's vulnerability than she realized, confirming that our evidence had struck close enough to the truth to trigger panic at the highest levels. I'll see you at 4 o'clock, I said, ending the call before Helena could issue any more veiled threats. Montrose immediately picked up his office phone and dialed a number from memory. Ruth, I need our audit demand delivered to Technova headquarters within the hour. Mark it urgent and requires signature confirmation. They're trying to control the narrative, Kingsley observed, reviewing his notes from Helena's call. The fact that they suspended Rachel Lawton proves they're worried about what evidence she might have provided. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photograph that made my blood run cold. Rachel Lawton sitting in what looked like a police station interview room, with 2 serious-looking investigators across from her. They arrested her, I whispered, showing the image to Montrose and Kingsley. Kingsley studied the photograph carefully. This looks staged. Notice how perfectly positioned everyone is for the camera angle. They want you to think Rachel's in legal trouble, but real police interviews don't look like Hollywood movies. Montrose's experience with corporate warfare helped him recognize the psychological manipulation. They're trying to isolate you emotionally, make you feel responsible for Rachel's situation so you'll back down from the investigation. Another text arrived with a different photograph. This one showed Victor Ashbourne in his office, surrounded by boxes of documents and shredding equipment. The image was clearly taken from outside his window, suggesting someone wanted me to see the evidence destruction in progress. Who's sending these pictures? I wondered aloud. Kingsley examined the phone number carefully. Unknown sender, but the timing suggests someone inside Technova who wants to help your case. Maybe Rachel isn't as isolated as Helena wants you to believe. My phone rang again, this time displaying Rachel's actual number. I answered cautiously, unsure what to expect. Don't believe anything they tell you about me. Rachel's voice was rushed and worried, but she wasn't in police custody. I'm in my car outside the building. They tried to confiscate my laptop, but I'd already copied everything to a secure cloud server. Relief flooded through me as I realized Helena's intimidation tactics had backfired. Rachel was free, the evidence was safe, and someone inside Technova was actively helping us gather intelligence about Victor's desperate cover-up attempts. Where are you now? I asked. Driving to meet you. I have something that changes everything. Rachel's voice carried a mixture of excitement and fear. I found a real reason Victor targeted you specifically. It's not just about stealing your work. Montrose and Kingsley leaned forward, sensing that we were about to discover the final piece of the conspiracy puzzle. What did you find? I asked. Victor wasn't just planning to steal credit for the Montrose project, Rachel explained. He was planning to sell your innovative programming techniques to Technova's biggest competitor, industrial espionage worth millions of dollars. The corruption was even deeper than we'd imagined, and Monday's confrontation would determine whether justice would finally triumph over corporate greed. Rachel burst through the doors of Montrose Industries, carrying a laptop bag and wearing the fierce expression of someone who had decided to fight rather than hide. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled from running, but her eyes blazed with the determination of someone who had discovered the smoking gun that would destroy our enemies. Victor's been selling company secrets to Pinnacle Systems for 8 months, she announced, spreading printed documents across Montrose's conference table. Your programming innovations aren't just stolen intellectual property. They're classified trade secrets being sold to our biggest competitor. Montrose's face went pale as he recognized the implications. Corporate espionage wasn't just fraud, it was a federal crime that could destroy Technova's reputation and cost them millions in lost business. His own company's competitive advantages were being sold to rivals who used that information to underbid them on major contracts. These payment records show regular transfers from Pinnacle Systems to Victor's shell company, Rachel continued, pointing to financial documents that painted a clear picture of ongoing treason. Every major technical innovation stolen from terminated employees has been sold within weeks of their firing. Kingsley studied the evidence with the focused intensity of a prosecutor building a case. This explains why Victor's been so systematic about targeting your best programmers. He's not just stealing individual projects. He's harvesting your entire company's technical advantages. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Helena and Victor meeting with legal team in conference room A. You have 20 minutes before they destroy everything. Someone inside the building is helping us, I said, showing the message to Montrose. Montrose stood up decisively. David, call the FBI white-collar crime division. Corporate espionage falls under federal jurisdiction, and we have enough evidence to trigger an immediate investigation. What about Helena's meeting demand? I asked. You're going, Montrose replied with a cold smile. But not alone and not as a victim. You're going as a witness in a federal investigation. 30 minutes later, I walked through Technova's lobby flanked by 2 FBI agents and David Kingsley. Helena Thornridge waited in the executive conference room, her confident expression faltering when she saw the federal badges and official documentation. Mr. Thompson, she said carefully, I thought we agreed this would be a private conversation. Plans changed, I replied, taking a seat across from her at the polished conference table. Agent Rodriguez, would you like to explain why we're here? Agent Rodriguez opened her briefcase and spread out the evidence that Rachel and I had gathered over the past week. Financial records, stolen code documentation, email communications, and payment transfers that proved systematic corporate espionage. Ms. Thornridge, we're investigating allegations of industrial espionage, fraud, and conspiracy involving your brother-in-law Victor Ashbourne, Rodriguez explained. These documents suggest Technova's trade secrets have been systematically sold to Pinnacle Systems. Helena's face went white as she realized the scope of the federal investigation. This is ridiculous. Victor is one of our most trusted employees. Where is Victor Ashbourne? Agent Rodriguez asked. He's not available for meetings today, Helena replied evasively. Rodriguez smiled grimly. That's interesting because our surveillance team watched him loading boxes into his car from the parking garage 20 minutes ago. Destroying evidence during a federal investigation is a serious crime. My phone buzzed with another anonymous text containing a photograph. Victor Ashbourne sitting in his car at Haven Ridge Airport, apparently preparing to flee the country rather than face the consequences of his crimes. Your anonymous helper is very thorough, Kingsley observed, showing the image to Agent Rodriguez. Federal agents are already at the airport, Rodriguez confirmed. Mr. Ashbourne won't be traveling anywhere today. Helena's composure completely cracked as she realized her family's criminal enterprise was collapsing around her. I want a lawyer, she said quietly. That's your right, Rodriguez agreed. But first, we need to discuss your cooperation in recovering the stolen trade secrets and identifying other victims of this conspiracy. Over the next hour, the full scope of Victor's operation became clear. 7 programmers fired over 3 years, dozens of stolen innovations sold to competitors, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent billing. Helena had been more than just a passive participant, actively facilitating the espionage through her corporate authority. Rachel arrived with additional evidence she'd retrieved from secure cloud storage, including recorded phone conversations where Victor discussed selling my programming techniques to Pinnacle Systems. Her courage in gathering this intelligence had been the key to exposing the entire conspiracy. Ms. Lawton, Agent Rodriguez said, your evidence gathering has been invaluable to this investigation. However, accessing company files without authorization does raise some technical legal issues. My heart sank, thinking Rachel might face prosecution despite her heroic efforts to expose the truth. Which is why, Montrose interrupted with a broad smile, Montrose Industries is offering Ms. Lawton a position as our Chief Information Security Officer, effective immediately. Her skills in detecting financial fraud are exactly what our company needs. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. Corporate whistleblowers who expose federal crimes typically receive protection rather than prosecution. Ms. Lawton's actions serve the public interest. As federal agents led Helena away in handcuffs, Montrose turned to me with an expression of respect and opportunity. Technova's going to need new leadership after this investigation concludes, he said. My company is prepared to recommend you for Victor's position, along with a substantial consulting contract for Montrose Industries. Standing in that conference room, watching justice finally triumph over corruption, I thought about my daughter Ellie asking when Daddy would come home for dinner, about my wife Sandra, who had supported me through months of 80-hour weeks without understanding why her husband was sacrificing so much for an ungrateful employer. When do I start? I asked, signing the consulting agreement that Montrose offered. Monday morning, I walked into Technova as the interim director of technical operations, tasked with rebuilding a department that had been poisoned by corruption. Rachel Lawton sat in the office next to mine, her new title reflecting the courage she'd shown in exposing the truth. Victor Ashbourne spent Monday morning in federal custody, facing charges that would likely send him to prison for decades. Helena Thornridge had already agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sweet didn't begin to describe how that Monday felt.